Namaste. So expectations are like Imodium on a trip to Mexico. You probably need some, but if you have too much, things are going to get all fouled up. And so, but we do have expectations, both of ourselves and of others. And every once in a while you hear a story about someone, it's usually someone, who runs afoul of the expectations of others. And I met somebody, I don't know, a long time ago now, almost 20 years ago probably, who grew up as the child of a pastor in a mainline church here in town. And so that meant that the congregation saw her rebellious phase, which for her was that she was very artistic, loved motorcycle jackets, and loved basically tearing apart other people's expectations of her, which probably would have been just fine until she decided she wanted to go to seminary, and then needed the recommendation of the people who had seen her in high school, had not seen her while she was away at college, and then she came back, as most people do, being quite different, but they couldn't get beyond the perception they had of her when they last knew her, and their expectations for what it is she wanted to do and how it is they thought she would be able to do that. And it was, for her, almost an immovable obstacle, yeah, or I almost said it was like a standoff. And it's not just those really big life issues. However, as I found out last night, I drive Uber a couple nights a week. And there's an apartment building downtown where there's a street, which is convenient, and another street that tees into it. And they're both pretty big streets. So on this intersection where they meet, there's an apartment building that sort of, the street does this, and the apartment building is placed like this. And so the question is, which side is the front? And she had called for rides by the time I got there the third time, and kept saying, I'm out front, I'm out front. Well, to me anyway, most people would think that out front probably faced one of those streets, because that's usually what we think of as front. However, the front of the apartment building, so here's the corner, here's the building, the front door was here, in back, but it was the front of the building. And so it's simple, it's benign, but she was highly frustrated because she kept telling people I'm right up front. And I'm sure they were looking along these two busy streets for what must be the front. And it's only when I decided that the obvious probably wasn't the answer that I could actually find her. So that's pretty benign. But what about people who have limitations that we can't see? So nobody would expect somebody with a broken leg to sign up for a marathon next week. The person with a broken leg might, especially if it was me, but we wouldn't expect it. But what if it was that they had some kind of a problem that wasn't so obvious? One time I was at a wedding rehearsal, and there was one of the groomsmen was practicing walking down the aisle, and he was looking like he was having the worst time anybody could ever have. And so me being who I am, I said, you're not being led to the slaughter, you could smile. And then he told me he had no cartilage left in his knee and was going to have surgery in 2 weeks. So sometimes we can't see what it is that's causing our perception not to line up with our expectations. And it's certainly an ongoing lesson that we're experiencing with one of our adult children, that just because something is really obvious to me doesn't mean it's really obvious to everyone. I've talked before about a study that was done by two guys one was named Dunning and the other one was named Kruger, and they developed this notion called, oddly, the Dunning-Kruger effect. Because what they found was that, essentially, less intelligent people tend to give themselves too much credit. More intelligent people tend to give other people too much credit. But what's interesting about it is both groups of people have a huge problem with their perceptions of what others are going to be able to do. And so this isn't something that we only run up against once in a while. We run up against it again and again, and even sort of famously, Jesus runs up against it in this idea that a prophet isn't welcome in his or her hometown. And we have to, if we want to move beyond this, either make our perceptions more accurate, which would help, obviously, or make our expectations fewer. Now, of course, you can lower the bar. One idea is you lower the bar far enough, nobody can disappoint you because you don't expect anything out of anybody. But we probably can't even lower the bar on ourselves anywhere near that close. Perfectionism is rampant. If I believe that I have to be perfect and never make a mistake, not that that's ever happened to me on either end, then my stress level goes up exponentially. And what happens usually in response, until I get in touch with this, is that I just ramp up my expectations. So if I expect myself to be perfect and I'm not perfect, you would think I would say, well, I should give myself a break. But no, I probably berate myself for not being perfect and redouble my efforts to be perfect. And then we run into that situation where, the thing about hitting your head off the wall is that it feels so darn good when you stop. What if whatever was or is, we decided would be enough? And I'm not talking about abandoning ambition as much as I'm talking about accepting reality. And the second part of it would have to be that I have to accept that the only person whose effort I can really analyze with any degree of accuracy is my own. And the only person's ability that hopefully I can come to develop with accuracy, come to understand with accuracy, is my own. It's interesting to me that in the end, especially near the end of life, what people seem to care about more is that somebody's present with them. Not really that they're present with them in any particular way. Not that they have to come offer wise insight into the transition that faces them. In fact, people that do that more often than not screw it up royally. It's always, there's articles you can actually read that will tell you the 10 things not to say at a funeral. And then if you stroll down to the nearest funeral home and crash the wake, which is easy to do because nobody really knows, you'll hear all 10 of them. If what's really required is presence in most of our relationships, if what's really required in most of our relationships is just that somebody listen and not that they solve your problems. This, by the way, is a uniquely male disease. The inability to listen, coupled with the notion that I must fix everything, has destroyed more relationships than you probably can count.
I told like that about right one day. I said, I'm mad, just let me vent, and don't tell me how to fix it yet. Maybe tomorrow.
Did you see there was a piece running on the internet maybe a year ago, and it was a man and a woman on a couch, but the woman's face was just kind of shot on the side, and she's talking about this pain. It's just this pain, and the worst part is I don't think it's ever going to go away. And as the camera pulls back, there's a nail in her forehead. So the dialogue goes on that the guy keeps saying, well, if you just, and she gets more and more mad, saying, I don't want you to fix it. You're always trying to fix it. To where near the end of it, she's saying, and all my sweaters are snagged. But there too is that clash of expectation and perception. Whereas if you just could have been present and heard and listened, maybe when she wasn't looking, things would have been much better. What would happen if we could be present and just listen to ourselves? I mean, I don't want to sound like a meditation commercial, but that's really the principal benefit of meditation. Or the other thing that listening practice does for you is the more that we practice listening without formulating our response instead of listening, the more we come to understand that we don't have to respond right away. And the other person probably will need some time to get used to that. But when we are thinking about what it is we're going to say in response to what it is we're hearing, we aren't really hearing it. It just doesn't work. If you've ever noticed, if there's music playing in the background and it has lyrics, and you're having a conversation with someone, you don't really know what song played, or if you hadn't heard it before, you aren't really sure what the words were. But the minute the conversation stops, it becomes perceptible. In the end, expectations are based on perception, most often. And perception is not an extremely reliable tool on which to base much of anything. And relationships, oddly, while they require a little bit of talk to get you interested, that old, it's a joke, but it's not really a joke, the elderly woman talking to the younger woman about her passing on her advice for relationships, and she says, sooner or later, no matter how smart they are, you have to look at them. And then she said, sooner or later, no matter how good they look, you have to have a conversation with them. And it is that balance. And it is, I think, useful when we find ourselves in conflict to take a step back and ask ourselves, what are the expectations that I have that are influencing this conflict? And how accurate are my perceptions? Could even ask, when you said this, did you mean that? Because it's amazing, even after years of practice, how much meaning we carry along with us from the past and randomly attach to things that people say. And of course, that meaning very often is not their intent at all. Hopefully we never get in that situation where we run afoul of people's expectations and perceptions enough that they want to go throw us off a cliff on the edge of town. Symbolically, probably pretty often. But the more we can drop that and have the humility to double check and check in and let go of expectations and refine our perception, the happier we'll be and the stronger our relationships will be.